Welcome back to Truth and Tribe, hosted by me, Mike Sorelli. I'm joined here by Rich Diviney, Eric Ballister, Brent Tucker, and Glenn Cowan, who have joined us for the 20th anniversary of 9/11, and this is episode 2. For those that have not listened, I encourage you to go back and listen to the first episode with these 4 fine gentlemen, as it will set the stage for what we're about to discuss. All right, guys, we left off sort of building towards the latter part of your careers. I think what I want to jump into is what we've learned, but to set that up, I want to know when, but more importantly, why did the war end for you? What was that that nail in the coffin, so to speak, that just made you get off that high-paced train we call the special operations community? And let's start with the lucky recipient. Rich, we'll go with you.
Okay. There was no nail in the coffin for me. It was I had done 20 years. I got in 96, and war broke out in 2001. Meanwhile, I got married. I had kids starting in 2005, and I missed a ton of their lives. And yeah, I think I'd been able to do everything I had set out to do. And I admittedly, I was probably ready to get out probably by year 18, to be honest with you. But it just makes sense to stay in until 20. And so yeah, I was ready to try something new. Yeah, there was no nail in the coffin. It was a natural progression that was I wanted to do it, and I think that helped with my transition because it was something I wanted to do, and then certainly encouraged by my family too.
Did you have any notions that you were irreplaceable?
No,
None.
No. You learn quite quickly that you're a drop in the bucket, but again, I don't want to say that in a disparaging way. I mean, you make your contribution while you're there, and you're prideful of that contribution. But at the same time, if you weren't just a drop in the bucket, then we wouldn't have a very effective force, would we? So you want to make sure that the force is very capable and competent without you. And in fact, in our business, we kind of age out to a degree. I mean, it's a young man's business, right? So I think if you're of sound mind, you can recognize that. And again, it's not as easy to recognize sometimes, but I certainly could.
Do you think there are guys that stay on that train too long?
Well, I think the answer is yes, but I don't want to say that in a judgmental way. I think mental health is inextricably tied to a profession such as this because the identity is so strong. You and I have had separate conversations about this, but I think one of the hardest things to give up when you leave it is that identity, because again, in our business, it's, we joke about the Marines. My brother was a Marine. The Marines have a pretty good philosophy. Is once a Marine, always a Marine. And you'll meet 80-year-old dudes who are like, I'm gunnery sergeant, whatever, right? It's still an identity, a strong identity for them. But in our business, we understand that, you earn your right to be there every day. And as soon as you leave, you are now a former, SEAL or operator or whatever. You're no longer, so people say, Rich Diviney, Navy SEAL. Like, no, I'm a former Navy SEAL. There's no pretenses. The guys who are out there doing it are the guys who we need to respect and honor because I've stopped earning my trident. And so, but with that comes this vacuum where if you don't have identities that kind of buttress that one, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard because you lose and leave that brotherhood that you experience every day. So.
And we're definitely going to talk about that transition in that, which it's fair to say it's an identity crisis.
Yes.
Brent, when and where for you and why?
Yeah, I'd feel like for me, the walls were just kind of closing in on several fronts. And it just happened all of a sudden for me. I was back from my second rotation to Syria. And for whatever reason, for the first time in my career, I felt fulfilled. I didn't feel like there was something else that I wanted to chase. I just felt like just internally, I was like that the book's closed. I felt it almost immediately, and I'd never felt that about my career before that. That same rotation, my back deteriorated at a rapid rate the first thing we do after target secure is move the couches out of the way so I could stretch my back out so we could walk 3 blocks back to, the vehicles. I mean, it was getting really bad in that effort. And when I got home, we went back to training, and anytime I was around explosives again, I would just have really weird mental instances to the point, when your wife looks at you and says, "Hey, if you don't go tell your doctors what's happening to you, I will," it kind of makes you go, well, maybe it's time. So that was, it was still hard to accept at first. With all those clear indicators, you would think it would be a little bit easier. But it helped having those indicators, but it still wasn't as easy as I thought it would be.
Would you say your devotion, and I'd be interested what the other guys think as well, your devotion to the guys, was that one of the hardest parts to get over? Like, you felt you were letting them down if you didn't continue to?
Absolutely. And to your point, I knew I was replaceable. I was probably 38, 39 at the time. I was getting up there. But I still felt like I had a lot to contribute, and I thought I had a lot of experience that I still wanted to, pass on to the guys. But yeah, it's hard to get off that. Still hard to step off that ride, even when you know it's time.
Glenn,
it built over a few years, right around the time, sort of starting as a squadron commander, and we were talking about sort of where and how things might change when you reach a certain level. And I kind of knew that I didn't want to move much beyond squadron commander. I think my superiors would have told you I wasn't going to move much beyond squadron commander. So, I loved that job in that particular role. I had my second daughter. She was premature and stayed in the hospital in the neonatal intensive care unit for a few weeks. And the community was great. I had some time, but as soon as we brought her home, they deployed me, which this is not a woe is me story. I wanted to go, obviously. But it was just one of those indicators of like my personal responsibilities were starting to change. That same year I got hurt doing a rehearsal for a mission. And I had a bunch of surgeries. I had a pretty significant TBI, brain injury. And, I wasn't the same. And sort of like you, my wife ended up calling my sergeant major, my command team partner. I was like, Glenn's kind of like not the same guy. He's like, I'm taking him right now. And he grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and walked into the medics. And that sort of started the process of like, I need to start taking care of myself. But at the same time, it was also the right time. I had started a company in 2013. I was starting to think about options. I had done everything I wanted to do. I left, like my cup was full. I felt good about leaving, and it just seemed like the right time.
Yeah, I would be, I would have to add, the family aspect to it as well. By this time, I have 4 kids. We had we'll just call it a string of incidents in our community. And I truly believe my 9-year-old daughter, and probably at the time 6-year-old twins, before that, had been to more funerals than any kid should have to go to. And they're starting to realize every time daddy leaves. My oldest daughter can still remember, me being in the hospital and being shot. It's really hard to say goodbye to those kids, every time. So that besides everything else I mentioned, like that weighed heavily on me. Really did. Still does.
Eric?
I think after my last deployment, I didn't know it was going to be my last deployment in 2017. I took a bunch of raps to the noodle, both enemy related and outgoing fire related. So I knew that there was cognitively some problems going on. I noticed memory, short-term memory and long-term memory, and just general emptiness. So I knew something was going on, but just like every other seasoned football player on the team, or you choose your sport, I would never pull myself out of the game. I got an award for being the best at what I was doing. So that was like confirmatory that I was going to remain in this place. My senior leaders, and thank God for them, I call this a blessing. They recognized it would be better for me to go to OTC and be an instructor. So they kind of made the decision for me. I was never going to leave. I wanted to leave it on the field, and I wanted to have no regrets after I left, saying that I achieved everything that I wanted to achieve. But I'm glad that somebody made that decision for me, because I was dealing with some significant traumatic brain injury issues on my last deployment that it would have just been that much harder to heal from it, which I've been healing for 2 years now, deliberate process to heal. And I'm still, there's a ton of work still to be done.
This speaks, one, to why I feel like I just never belong, sort of that imposter syndrome that we talk about. Because a testament to what you guys are describing about our guys is 99% of the time you had to tap our guys out before they would. The stories of guys that lost, legs below the knee, that got a fake leg and tried to get back into the game. Guys that you knew were injured or suffering mentally, but they would not stop. And you don't see that anywhere else. That just never quit mentality. I will do whatever it takes to win, even at the cost of my own mental, spiritual, and physical being. But there's also a negative to that side. But you won't find that selflessness in many places. I want to touch, guys, and I know this isn't woe is me. It's not the point, but to give the listeners that didn't serve, who are interested in learning, the impacts of the operational tempo that you guys maintained, deployment after deployment after deployment. What were the impacts on you mentally, spiritually, and physically? And then also the second part of that question is, what were the impacts to probably the unsung heroes of the war, our families? Because I too was married at the time with 2 kids. So Glenn, we'll start with you.
It started off with kind of the young kind of piss and vinegar, like, single, not much responsibility other than to the mission and to the unit, wanting to deploy, praying that every time phone rings, like, oh, was something going on? Are we getting out of here? Like wanting to deploy. And that turned into balancing always wanting to deploy and always wanting to be involved and always wanting to be making a difference with other life responsibilities that started to kind of enter as you kind of grow and mature and start families. And so trying to balance that, selfish fulfillment of being with your other family, or, kind of like being in the units, like kind of like having a mistress, in the sense that like you have other responsibilities and another sort of family and another, requirement. And I found striking that balance difficult. In Canada, again, we kind of have a much smaller community. So our guys get burnt out because there's a lot asked of the guys. Whereas in the US, you guys kind of have specialized units to kind of do each mandate and each task. Our guys were kind of asked to do it all, and to balance that. We grew over time as we matured, and sort of as our command grew and matured, we got bigger. But once you start getting hurt, it becomes like never being able to fix your injury. And I noticed this as a squadron commander. There was probably 2/3 of the force was either in surgery, awaiting surgery, or coming out of surgery. And you had to work in rehab, physio, surgeries into your manning. Like, I wasn't an NCO responsible for manning, but man, what a crazy job to keep the balance of the manning requirements, so you have the force ratios to do what's asked of you while keeping your guys healthy. It's a challenging balancing act.
For me, obviously, it's impossible for it not to take an impact on your family. I'll tell you this. I feel like I'm one of the few and fortunate. My wife never told me, "Hey, I need you to come home. I'm dealing with a lot," and nothing on the ones that do. I mean, everyone has a breaking point that they reach. I never felt it outright, like directly, of her saying, "Hey, it's been too much," but indirectly, I mean, you'd be completely desensitized not to know that a wife with 4 kids is out there feeling like she's a single mom at times. So yeah, that was. But yeah, again, I can't think. I was on a team for 16 straight years, and between my white side and unit time, and me and my wife were married 12 of those. But she never asked me to stay back, never asked me not to go, never called and said, "Hey, I can't take this." So I couldn't ask for anything more. So I'm trying to make up for that in retirement. That's all I can do.
You've got a tall task. Good luck with that. Let us know how it works. Glenn, you said something, and again, this sounds horrible at face value, but after I've had time to reflect, when you were in a special operations unit, they were your first family. You actually spent a majority of your time, months on end, without seeing your own families. And your immediate families, your wife and children, it was almost like they were your second family. Does that resonate with you guys? I know that sounds awful at face value, but when you look at the reality of how much time you spent with them, there is some reality there.
I mean, I think what they say, well, you're show me your time, and I'll show you your priorities.
Mm-hmm.
And so of course, it would seem as if my priorities were that I put my work for first. I would say I think the biggest thing I struggled with, and I think it's was with FaceTime and internet and everything coming out to you. I think the hardest thing for me was, hey, do I FaceTime my wife and kids every day? Because it's hard to, on me. But am I selfish for not giving that to my wife and kids? I would try to do once a week or something like that. But I almost hate that I could have called them more, but didn't. But I just couldn't. It would make those deployments that much harder seeing them.
I had some guilt around that, especially when my kids were little and there were like complications with because I wanted to go, and I knew that I should not necessarily take a knee or focus on my family, but I knew that my wife was a rock and she kind of had it, and so I knew I could go and let her shoulder that burden of raising 2 kids under 3, one of whom is a preemie, while she's maintaining her own sort of requirements and professional competencies, because she's kind of indirectly in the community, and I just knew selfishly that she could do it, and I was happy to go, and I sometimes even felt relieved once I was out, because those responsibilities to the unit they were easy. Even the most difficult day was relatively easy, whereas sometimes home was not easy, and it was there was ambiguity and uncertainty at home, but that type of uncertainty and ambiguity at work in that environment was I don't know how to describe it other than just it made sense. There was a rationality to it, and it was relatively easy to deal with. And you had 30 brothers that were there kind of dealing with it too.
I'll tell you just a quick story. I haven't thought of the story in a while, but you reminded me of it about having kids. As a junior assaulter, I went home to see the birth of my twins. Flew home from Afghanistan, got there just in time to see the birth of them, and it was amazing. And my wife got to experience that together. And about a week later, I was looking at rotators to get back over, because that's what we do. I came here, I did my father thing, but I have a team that I have responsibilities to as well. If anything would have happened while I was at home with mama and the babies, I'd never forgive myself. I was at the team room, and my troop sergeant major actually called the team room and said, "Brent, what are you doing at work?" I said, "Oh, well, I'm packing my bags." He goes, "Yeah, I see that. Is that you that's on that rotator coming over?" I said, "Yep, I'll be there in 2 days." He says, "If I see you in Afghanistan, you're fired." And I thought, was he serious? Was he joking? I didn't test him on that, and I said, "Okay, well, I'll see you guys when you get home." And internally, I was upset at him for doing that to me. In hindsight, if I see him again, I will thank him for that.
I think it's a product of not being able to normalize also. Like, special operations had continuous warfare, and the fact that we kept on going over and over and over again, we never got enough dwell time to really process the fact that, hey, you're home now. Like, be home and take care of your family. We never got a chance to do that. It was 10 months and you're back in it again. So at some point, I believe that it does sound messed up that it becomes your priority, your family, because that's the thing that is life or death. And you don't look at the second thing that's not life or death, but it's even more important, your family. You can't ever get a chance to come back, normalize, reshift back to what's important. That's just not allowed. It never happened for me in my career, and I doubt it happened for any of you guys either.
Yeah, I think just to get back to the idea when you leave, I would replace the word easy with just straightforward. Right?
Yeah.
Because it's almost weird how you're getting ready to deploy and you feel so stressed out.
Or like a simplicity to it.
Yeah, and then as soon as you get on that airplane, it's like everything falls away. And it's just very simple and straightforward. But I would say it was always hard for me to leave. Always. And I only did a couple deployments. I met my wife about 5 years in to me being a SEAL. So I did a couple deployments as a single guy. And so, but everything after that was, married, and then of course kids, and my kids, especially my eldest son, had issues with me deploying. And I remember one point he was about 8 or so. He was a Cub Scout, and I was home and I was trying to do the dad thing as best I could. And so I talked to his troop leader and I said, "Hey, why don't we bring the whole troop to the SEAL team, and give them a tour, show them everything, and run around." It was awesome. We're at the troop, spent a day, at the team, and they saw the stuff, and it was cool. And it was a couple weeks later, we were at a barbecue or something with another buddy of mine. He's not a team guy, and my son and I were talking to him, and we were recounting to him how the troop or the Cub Scouts had spent the day at the team. My buddy looks at my son and says, "Hey, it must be so awesome having a dad who's a Navy SEAL, right?" And my son looks directly at him and says, "I wish my dad were a garbage man." Oof. And we're like, "Why?" It's like, "Because then he'd be home." And so you get that, and you so those clues, and I'm going to echo what you said. My wife she's been the rock. She was so awesome, and she handled everything, and she never thought twice, and she always supported everything. But you start getting those indicators, and you're like, you know what? And the interesting about the military, regardless of whether or not your priority is your family, I always joke, the military will make itself the priority. I mean, they tell you you're going to go, you're going to go, right? Yeah. I mean, you have to go. And so I think for me, the toll was holistic, and it was certainly, I just got tired of leaving over and over again. And part of that was buttressed by this idea that the mission itself wasn't as compelling anymore. And I think the third part of that for me as an officer, as I increased in rank, as you increase in rank as an officer in any of these units, you get further and further away from the guys, the boys, and that matters. It really does, because you're not necessarily one of the guys anymore, and you're ranking out of that position. I think it probably the very senior enlisted probably feel that as well too. But so I think all three of those factors.
So let me ask you straight out. Was it that the mission wasn't as compelling, or were you starting to question the validity of the mission we were conducting?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of a critic to begin with. You know, I try
No
to,
kidding.
Yeah, I try to ask questions all the time. So I'd always been asking difficult questions about the mission, and I felt like as I actually ranked up, I had more of an ability to influence that, right? Because as the commander in charge of a task force, now I can actually shape it into a way I think is more compelling or more valuable. So I'd always been asking hard questions about the mission, but it just didn't. You know, at the beginning days, the mission and the fatherhood and the family was like, okay, well, I can sacrifice one for the other. But as we rolled down the road, it was like, no, home is much more important, right? And I think part of it is that clock you were talking about too, Brent, is like I know there's something in the back of your mind that says, you know, I've gone this long, I've done this many, and I'm still okay. And you're just wondering how many times you want to roll the dice. You don't think about that. You don't want to think about that, but it pops in there a couple times. It really does. So
you're going to roll a snake eyes at some point, like
right.
Brent said. Yeah,
right.
You know, Brent, you mentioned something about not calling your family enough while on deployment. Rich and I actually talked about this on the Extortion 17 podcast. For me personally, when we boarded that C-17 and departed, it was like 2 to 3 days of depression. And I felt like a horrible, horrible father. But after, it was almost like clockwork on every deployment. Even on the training missions or the training we conducted when you left for 3 weeks to go train in a different state. After those 2 to 3 days, it was like locked in. This is the mission. If I want to be a good father, just get back to him. That's your mission. Get back to him. I do remember, I'll share you a story. So I got wounded pretty badly on my second deployment. And the only grace when I was wounded was I knew I was going home and I would get to see my 2-year-old daughter. And when they rolled, you know, for Iraq to Germany, Surgeons Germany to Bethesda, and then to Balboa. And then, you know, when we arrived at Balboa, they had myself and the other guy that was injured, and our families were waiting. And I see my daughter with a little sign that says, like, "Welcome home, Daddy." And you got to remember, they were pumping fluids into me, so I look like the Puff State Marshmallow Man, whatever the phrase is
good
here.
Pump.
I'm
Get
sure,
a good flash pump.
Stay puff. It was not a good look, and she probably couldn't recognize me, but she would not leave my wife's arms to come to me. She didn't even recognize me. There was fear in her eyes, and that always stayed with me. Guys, mentally, and I know, you know, Brent, you were shot, and how many surgeries total?
Double digits.
Double digits.
Yeah.
And you still worked through all those surgeries, trying to probably get feeling back in your right arm. How many more deployments after that?
That was in 14. So I did 4 more after that. In fact, I got shot in the first, like the end of the first third of the deployment. It shattered my ulna into like 70 something pieces, just a direct hit to my ulna. Caused damage to my ulnar nerve, but really, surprisingly, the rehab was fairly quick on it. They put a plate in there, even though it was just simple hand stretches at first. It felt like I was doing CrossFit, just stretching out my hand, but it came back fairly fast. And I actually, once again, tried to load a bird to go meet him. And you were there with us.
Yep.
And that time my command was actually like, or the guys on the ground were like, if you think you can come over here, right on.
I kid you not. Like, it's not only Brent, but the Echo got the communicator got shot also. And for the debrief, the guy who got shot tried to get patched up hurry up and get patched up so he could go back to the debrief. He was sent away from the debrief because he was bleeding still. And somebody said, "Are you kidding me?" So it's these caliber of people, like, they're shot and their number one concern is getting back to the debrief to go over lessons learned to get ready for the next one. So just want to add something to what Brent was saying.
That's the men and the women we served with. That's you guys.
Well, I didn't make it back over there. My evil physical therapist did not like that idea, but she also knew she couldn't stop me, at least verbally. So she came up with a physical test. She said that they came up with that I had to pass. I barely, there was like one particular thing in there that I think she knew I wasn't going to be able to do. And, to be honest with you, that put me into a depression for a little bit of time, that I worked so hard and all I wanted to do was get back there and not end a deployment like that. And I wasn't able to. So,
guys, we're going to get to the lessons learned or the takeaways from the last 20 years. The things that we can share with the listeners who are not at war, but can learn from our mistakes and possibly apply them to their families, their lives, or their businesses. But before that, I do want to hear, because we all took casualties mentally, and I'm sure some of us are still trying to repair that. What's that one story of that fallen brother, the one you just can't let go of? The one that just sits there, doesn't sit well with you. And about the impact that individual had on you. And Brent, I'm going to start with you on that one.
It's got to be that's a fairly easy question, actually. For me, it was John Dunbar. That's we lost him in Syria. It's everything about it. I had for most of that rotation, I'd kind of led all the walk-ins to target, being one of the senior guys in the troop. They came out to me and said, "Hey, John's gonna, you can't lead us out forever. John's gonna lead this one out." And Syria was just a weird time. Syria, IEDs had been a thing my whole career. And Eric, I think you can attest to this. I don't think I was ever scared of IEDs the way I was scared of IEDs in Syria. They just were everywhere. I mean, they just took it to a new level. And I pulled John to the side and I told him everything that I could think of. I was like, "Hey, watch for this and watch for this." And I told him, "Hey, do you want me to walk by you?" And he's like, "No, I got this, Brent." And I didn't want to act like he didn't, because he did. Let me tell you about John Dunbar real quick. John was never the most talented talented guy at the unit. Like we talked, we said we don't always hire the best guy. We hire the right guy. John wasn't going to outshoot a lot of people on the range. John, but no one worked harder than John. Man, you're not going to outwork John. He was humble. He was a hard worker. He was a great teammate, just a great teammate. He was loyal as could be. I remember walking in in the team room one time, and he was literally arguing with another guy in the troop to say how much better our troop was than his troop, and we had just got him, and so that's the type of pride he immediately had. Well, that night we were going to target, and a early warning device went off, and it struck the wall charge on John's back, and it immediately killed John, and it killed Matt Tunrow, who was with us, who was directly behind him immediately. Turned to a mass cas. We probably lost, or were out of the fight. Didn't lose them, but they weren't combat effective. About six more people, including our dog, and it went from a normal night to probably one of the bigger events we've had at the unit for a very long time. never want to talk a lot about it publicly because John has a son, and I would never want to say anything that he doesn't already know, other than his dad was a hero. His dad died with his brothers doing what his dad wanted to do. He didn't suffer. I miss him, and I wish things were different that night. That's part of the business, and they hate being kind of like heartless like that and ending it. That's just part of the business, but that's what it is. It hurt us for a little bit, and we took it down deep. It doesn't carry with me until you make me talk about it, and then and then tomorrow, or by tonight, I'll tuck it back away, and I won't think about it again until his anniversary, and we'll get drunk and tell stories about John, which there are no shortages of, and I think that's how most of us deal with it, I would say, successfully. But yeah, that was mine.
I've never met men who can compartmentalize better than the men we know, which is why they're so effective for so long. But I think everything comes, it's like a pot eventually boils over. You can only compartmentalize it for so long. Glenn, is there anyone in your life that impacts you?
My former unit is incredibly lucky that we have, had horseshoes in ways that we probably shouldn't have had horseshoes, and I'll just leave it at that. But to answer this question, a very profound loss was on a NCO that I didn't actually know that well. I was in the conventional army at the time. His name was Mark Leger. He was a master corporal, and one of the 4 first fatalities in Afghanistan in April of 2002. And I mean, being a troop commander or a platoon commander is a really daunting task when you're new, because you kind of stand up there in front of a whole bunch of, more experienced, older, more mature, seasoned NCOs. And you do your best to kind of fake it, and we had just finished our workup training for Afghanistan. So this is winter in northern Canada, training for Afghanistan of all places. We got on the bus at the end of it, and I felt like Forrest Gump, can't sit here, seat's taken. and Mark was just like, come here, young fella. And I sat down beside Mark, and we had about a 6-hour bus ride. And I just got to know him, and he was just a great guy, really compassionate, tough as nails. And the night he died, we had a range booked for us to go and train with my company. And then this warning order came in for their company to go and support some American folks. So they kind of took our range. And I was in the gym, and he was in there, and we were just in the gym alone. And I kind of said, you guys stole our range tonight. You effort fuckers. You guys took our range, and we just kind of did a workout. It was super chill, like a normal night. And 3 hours later, an F-16 dropped a bomb on them and killed them. And it was just really surreal to process that. And I just remember his empathy and his compassion for sort of the new, green, young, cocky platoon commander that I probably thought I was amazing. And everyone else on the bus, they're like, this guy's not. And he was just a really, really good man. And so that's, he's left that left a profound impact on sort of, being open and welcoming, and, lend your empathy and compassion and experience to help other people, because we're all on the same team. He wasn't in my company. He wasn't in my platoon. Just a good man.
Rich, I know we've been through this once before. Sorry to put you through it again.
No, yeah, I know. I mean, extortion. We talked about extortion, and it's a huge one, obviously. No, I mean the story I'll tell. First of all, I have to say, I mean, I'm fortunate in the sense I never lost anybody on any of my missions. Now I know how much luck has to do with that as well, but again, you lose friends too many times, and I'll echo, again what Brent said is like my wife and I went to far too many funerals for the ages we were at. But no, I mean the one that I will talk about is a guy named Brian. I can't say his last name just because of the unit that he was with, but he and I went through buds together, and we were really kind of just tight the whole time. And he went to a SEAL team. We kind of separated after buds, and then he got out of the military service and started some other service. But he died in Afghanistan. It was the I found out the Tuesday of my retirement week. I was retiring on Friday of that week, and that's when they called me. And so I missed his service, which was up at I missed his service, and because I had my retirement, I couldn't reschedule it. And so it hits hard because he was just the guy was just pure joy. He was just so funny. He was just a nutball, but a very competent nutball, right? And I think throughout, I've really felt like it's important just to stay connected as much as you can. First of all, I remember going up because we all went up to receive his body at Dover, so it was a bunch of us who went up, and I remember we did that, and a couple things happened, right? That evening after we received his body, a bunch of us got into a room together. It was about 10 of us, SEALs, and one of our fellow SEALs said, "Hey, we need to start telling each other we love each other more often. We need to tell each other we love each other. We can't skip this stuff," right? And it really it resounded with me, and I do it more often now. I tell my friends, "Hey, love you, man," and I don't say it's serious, right? Because you want them to know. But we also we sat around a couple nights later. We sat around a campfire and we're just laughing till we were crying, telling stories about the antics and things like that. So stay connected, and then of course his spouse, his widow, he had 3 kids, who were a little bit older. But it was really cool for me because his spouse, wonderful lady, she hit me up and she said, "Hey, Rich, do you mind, can I buy some books for his kids?" I said, "No, you can't. I'm going to send you some books." Right. So I sent books, and I said, "You know what? I'm going to do something." So I went through all my photos, and I picked photos of me and Brian, different ones, and then in the book, I wrote the story, a little bit of the story of the photo, and put it in and like kind of personalized for each kid, and sent it to each kid so that they had something, because I didn't want it to be about their dad and know something about their dad. So I think if you try to part of the healing and actually coping, because it's not just healing, some of it we never heal from, but the coping process is to remember the good things. And I know pretty much every funeral, almost every funeral I've been to, and I started this when I was asked to speak at funerals too. I do this even, I've done it at some family funerals too, but almost every one, there's always humor, right? And oftentimes like top 10 lists of like, how if this person's haunting you type stuff. And it's just hilarious. And it puts a spin on this that makes it forever, right? And I think that's part of the coping process, which is important to do.
Mine's also extortion. The first time that I was really connected with what war does and what it takes away. And I think when Andy was killed on extortion, and Andy was a really good friend of mine, and that made it personal. And I think that was the differentiator. That was the time where it made it real, because just like all of us are saying, we were on the same team together. We were on the same white side team together. He went to selection and made it through before I did. And then I can't help but think that he was on the bird instead of me being on the bird. So there's a little bit of that. And then being around the community and being around his wife and his children and having that connection, I think that was a formative time in my life, in my military career, where I really matured there, because I knew that how high the stakes were, and to have like somebody like that pulled from the community, I think was something that ended up being the start of my humanity being taken away. And I think that happened through some other incidents that I had on the battlefield too. But when you lose somebody like that, and then you see the impact in the community and with their family, it does something to you. It rewires your brain. And we didn't have time to deal with it also. That was the other thing. Like, extortion happened and the mission continued on. So guys don't really do the work that is necessary because they can't, because they're right back into the fight again. So I think that was the bigger one. But then it just kept on happening and happening and happening. You're at Arlington every year, and then your neighbors, gets killed, and you see his wife and his kids every day. So there's that repetition, just taking hit after hit, to where you can't live like that. You have to get away from it. So after 20 years, it was pack the U-Haul and drive across country to get as far away as possible, because you're going to, if you stay in that community, you'll be destroyed.
And he had a wife and two boys.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a quick one. Because somebody asked me this recently. They said, hey, if you could go back and do it all again, not change a thing, would you do it? Rich.
All right, let me give you off the reservation answer.
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is no. If I could go back again, I would enjoy observing everything I did, but I would not change anything, because I think everything that we do gets us to where we are today. I was fortunate enough to be able to go to the centennial class of my BUD/S class. So I was 210. I went to 310. I was able to secure them from their Hell Week. And I remember standing in front of these guys, and I said, I'm standing in front of you. I've had a very successful career. I'm with a really cool team. I have a beautiful wife. I have beautiful kids, and kind of outlined a bunch of stuff. And I said, none of that would have happened had I uttered 2 words during my Hell Week. Had I uttered those 2 words, I quit during the Hell Week, my entire life would be different, right? Nothing of what I have today. And it goes for mistakes too. I mean, our mistakes we learn from, we rebound, but it drives everything that. So I would be ultimately afraid of saying something with the butterfly effect and changing what I have now. So the answer is yes, I would do everything again, and I wouldn't give myself any advice.
Well, I echo what Rich said. No one's where we are without our experiences. I would have done it all over again. I probably would have elected to be an enlisted. Yeah.
Those dirty enlisted.
I probably
they got another one of us.
Yeah,
We're surrounded.
Yeah, I probably would not have done it as an officer.
Go look at your retirement check and say that again.
Brett.
I can't change anything.
Can't change anything.
Of course, I'd absolutely do it all over again. It's made me who I am. I look my kids in the eyes every day, knowing that their dad did something worthwhile in his life. Hell yeah, I'd do it again.
I say same thing, and I think that it gives me a good perspective on the other things in my life. I think there's some really tough things that I went through, that we go through, but I think it makes everything that more bittersweet. And I would hate for everything to be replayed over again and me not be there. And potentially I was the differentiator that helped somebody get back home. So without a doubt, I'd put myself right back in the same position again.
When that person asked me, I said, I don't even need to think about this. The answer is yes. To be part of the men and the women's lives that I served with, and to experience that esprit de corps, that shared adversity, without a doubt, even if I couldn't change a thing. And Rich, to your point, I think I just would have told the guys that we lost, I love you more.
Yeah.
And I told that to Eric when we hung up on the phone a few days ago. I don't know if you caught. I'm like,
I
don't know if I weirded you out.
I caught it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm getting better about it. It doesn't seem as weird, but it does catch me off guard. And I don't think it should. And I totally understand what you're talking about, and I get it. And I love you too, bro.
Well, guys, this is such a broad question to look at 20 years and say, well, what have we learned? What are your biggest takeaways? What are the things that just stand out to you that you learned over the past 20 years? And possibly, what are the things that you would say to the young millennials, the Gen Zs, even the Gen Alphas that are coming behind us? What advice would you give to them? And I know that's broad. I'll give you a little time to think about that. And then, of course, we'll start with the token Canadian.
Yeah, it's almost too heavy a question to kind of process. I think we all rush to the sound of gunfire by very nature of the attributes, I think, that compel us to do what we do. But don't hesitate to take that pregnant pause. Have a little bit of tactical patience. When time and opportunity permits, use that time and opportunity. And that's probably the biggest tactical lesson that I sort of took away from everything. But I think it applies at a strategic level. I think it applies to senior military and political decision making. I think it applies on the battlefield. I think it applies in business. Is recognize time and opportunity, and know when you have to do a TST and move fast with very minimal information and incomplete information. And
TST for the audience.
A time-sensitive target, or moving very quickly on incomplete information to secure a type of target set. But when time is presented to you, take it and utilize that time to be as deliberate and as methodical and as precise as you can be. And so, yeah, I think that's probably my answer is recognize time and opportunity, and sometimes like slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Yeah.
Rich.
So I think first of all, for the next generations, and I tell my kids too, it's more important to know how to think than it is to know the information, right? I mean, it's not about memorizing facts and figures as much as it's about understand how to think critically and not take things necessarily at face value, and learn to question and learn to figure it out and be curious and be open-minded and be empathetic, right? Because you have to add those things into the equation to have true depth of wisdom. So learn how to think. And then the other one is to understand that there's very little in this life that's black and white. I mean, it's so nuanced. And, in terms of war, again, we've talked about war, and I think that war comes with it. The word comes with some connotation there that we have to be very careful of, because I always say, like, and you guys might agree with me, I always say I'm actually a pacifist, and it doesn't mean I'm not a pacifist. Like, I don't think we should ever go to war. There is certainly there are people on this planet who don't deserve to be here because of what they do to other people, right? But I am someone who, because I've lived it, understands that war is something that has to be very deliberately thought through and thought out and analyzed and looked at carefully, because the problem is not necessarily always the face value problem. I mean, we talk about terrorism, and terrorism itself. I mean, it's not, terrorism is not necessarily a military problem. It's like calling obesity a problem of fitness, right? It's more than just that, right? Terrorism there's an ideological problem. There's an economic problem. There's an environmental problem. All these things that move into this thing. And I think one of the things that we didn't do correctly, and I say this holistically, politicians, military, everybody, as a nation, as a coalition, right, is that we didn't attack the problem on all the fronts that it could have been attacked. And the military was the largest effort in attacking a problem that was much more than just military. And I think I would hope that the generations coming up and our next generation politicians, our next generation military leaders, always seek to find the nuance and always seek to find the different aspects, different perspectives, and make the decisions a little bit more deliberately.
Would you say committing troops to any action should never be taken lightly?
Yeah, because you're committing lives. And these are people with families and wives and kids and friends, and and so I mean, and it sucks on both ends. I mean, again, this is what we all realize because we've been out there. War sucks for both sides. It sucks for us, yes, as the people that are doing it. It sucks for our families. it sucks for the people in the country too. I mean, I remember having a really, really open conversation with one of my commanding officers, and we were talking about this idea. Is like, and he was telling me, he's like, I was leaving my house before going to deployment. This is my commanding officer. He's like, I was leaving my house and I was looking at my kids, because we all do it. And he was like, I was imagining what it would be like if we lived in a world or a nation or an area where I had to fear someone kicking my door down, right, and coming into my house and awaking my kids, right? I mean, that is a really good way to start being empathetic, about what people have to experience on both ends. So war and committing troops, there's a whole host of people that have to be considered. And again, I'm not saying this is, there are some decisions that need to be made and some decisions that need to be made quickly, even in the military aspect. But it's not as easy as going in and raining terror or dropping bombs or killing as many people as possible. These types of definitive armchair quarterbacking that we're seeing right now it becomes frustrating to, especially from people who I don't think understand the nuances like maybe some of us do.
I caution to say the armchair quarterbacks. Yeah. Are you guys finding that the armchair quarterbacks who are now weighing in on Afghanistan, some of who've never even, or most of them who've never even served over there, do you find that frustrating as a professional military leader?
Well, everyone's an expert, right?
Behind the keyboard, yeah.
Yeah, everyone's an expert. We live in a fast-paced online society where there's anonymity. So you can, run your mouth with no real repercussion or accountability.
No accountability, right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think to the armchair quarterbacks out there, I think healthy debate is healthy. I think you should be accountable for your debating. I think you should be, in a position where, you own what you say and you back it up. And, there's, what you say that you can say it with from a free speech perspective, but you also, have to deal with what you say. And I just think we just live in this. I mean, it used to be a 24-hour news cycle. Now it's like an instantaneous Twitter cycle. And it has totally changed, I think, how policy is made, how decisions are made, how timelines are viewed. And I'm by no means an expert, but I have to put my phone down because I get pretty frustrated.
Have humility. I think have humility also. Realize that you have an opinion. Armchair quarterback people have an opinion, but with that opinion, they also have the right to defer to somebody who has experience. So you can't sit here and have an opinion and not listen to the person that has experience.
But everyone's entitled to their perspective or opinion, regardless if they have experience in a certain realm or not. I don't think anyone here is saying that. And they have the right to free speech. Where it gets to me in the frustration, I can't even watch CNN or Fox News anymore. I have to turn it off. Is you hit it, this lack of accountability for what you say. I try to be very cautious about what I put out there. And when I'm cautious about it, I'm thinking about other people's perspectives and other people's feelings.
Yeah. Well, the problem with social media, again, we could run down this road a long time, is that social media has turned it's given people the ability for opinion to become fact, right? Because when someone puts an opinion and it gets retweeted hundreds of thousands of times, and then it started to get reported on news. I mean, news channels would start to say, "Oh, we got this tweet," and it's like, "Oh my God!" I mean, might as well get your news off the bathroom stall, right? I mean, that's how valuable that information is, right? So yeah, we all are entitled to our opinions, but opinion does not equal fact.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a distinction that we all have to be.
And I think that's one of the big casualties right now is where does anybody go to find that fact?
Yeah.
And we see it in the context of what's happened over the past sort of 10 years with sort of global war on terror, Afghanistan, military type issues. We've seen it very pervasive in the last year with COVID and what's happening there. And now we're seeing it, under the microscope with what's happening on this Afghanistan pullout. Mm-hmm. And it's, the fact that we sort of, the collective, we don't really know where to go to get factual information to inform opinion and to inform decision and to inform policy. And it's a I don't know what the answer is, but it's just something, to your point, in, you know, what would you tell the next generation is have your eyes open, be curious, and don't be afraid to question things.
I know there's a whole nother topic, but but it relates to this. We won't go down the rabbit hole of it though. Are there armchair quarterbacks about this? Absolutely. There are, and there always will be. I would say in a very polarizing environment that we're in, generally speaking, most Americans, and on like 90%, whatever percentage you want to throw at it, agree on these two things. It was time to leave Afghanistan, and the way we did it was wrong. So of all the armchair quarterback that's going on, it feels like it's one of the few times we all at least agree on that premise.
Agreed, yeah.
So I don't feel like there's a lot of armchair quarterbacking on this that's as flagrant as, let's say, coronavirus or something else that has a lot of different opinions. I feel like America, for the most part, agrees on those two opinions.
Brent, let me ask you this, and I do want to get to your lessons learned given your experience. Do you think there will be accountability for the way we exited Afghanistan? Because if there was a military commander making the bad decisions that were made, he'd be relieved on the spot.
Tune in for part 3 of this answer.
Yes. That's a fair answer.
But I can also give it as short as this. Will there be? I don't think so. Should there be? Absolutely. About as blunt as I can put it.
Poetic.
Yeah.
And accountability is not,
write that down.
The problem is the accountability is not towards singular entities. No. There's a whole host of failures, and they're both political. They're military failures. The accountability is expansive, but unfortunately, sometimes the accountability factor times out.
I saw a note. Actually, it was a LinkedIn post from a guy named Sean McFarlane, who was a 3-star general. And I served for in Ramadi. And you could tell the weight of what's happened is weighing on him. And he welcomed accountability and welcomed a very healthy debate about what he could have done differently in order to learn from this as a nation. Now, I don't think that will happen. No. But I think it was a great message from one of our senior military leaders that they were willing to do that.
I can't help but you touched on it a little bit. This is the way I view it. We have 3 commanders in this room. If any of you would have planned a mission with global eyes, you know, that are going to see it, and you planned at such an inept level and caused deaths, American deaths, because of that, do any of you have any thought or that you would keep your job? Do you believe you would?
Let me tell you from my soul. And I've done this before with a guy who we talk about. I made him hold me accountable for something that happened. I said, you have to hold me accountable or I won't be able to live with this. Mm-hmm. I think as military leaders, yes, we would have demanded for our spiritual and mental well-being, we would have demanded to be held accountable. Whether that ended our careers or not, that's the decision for somebody else to make. But I would have demanded it. And
what I hate most is in military operations where things do go wrong, and we've all seen it time and time before. If something goes wrong on infill, which is just a risk, is always an inherent part of any mission, and we accept that. And if something goes wrong, sometimes you'll find that they'll find a scapegoat to punish because something went wrong and someone has to be punished. And I always hated that mentality because sometimes things just go wrong in combat. But this isn't that. You know, this is something. It went wrong. That could have been averted.
The other thing I'll just add to that, because I think this is part of the problem we're experiencing right now in terms of timing. Okay, because there's a timing that is involved in accountability. Okay, if any one of us had something go wrong on a target, okay, someone goes down or whatever, none of us start putting the after action process into play in that moment. We solve the problem first, right? And so the problem, I think, that we're seeing in part is that there's a lot of finger pointing going on and there's still a problem to be solved, right? And I think as a nation we have to understand, hey, let's solve the problem first, okay, and then and then figure out what went wrong after that, right? Because right now it's backwards, right? There's a lot of, finger pointing. Hey, this could have been done. This is how I would have done it. That means nothing in the moment in terms of getting the problem solved. And I think that's another thing that has to be taken into account, and it's an expectation we should have for our leadership.
It's kind of I think potentially to that person, it could be a double-edged sword. We're in the midst of a federal election right now. And, the day that election was called was the day that the U.S. announced, like, we are pulling out real fast. And so it sort of spun their cycles and really politicized this issue, because it's a 36-day federal campaign to be the prime minister of the country. And, I'm sure, the leadership kind of said, I'll do what I can to kind of solve the problem. But the leader that says, I know I might lose this election, but I'm going to, suspend my campaigning to solve the problem, I vote for that guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because he's displaying leadership and accountability and, showing that, in the time of a crisis, there are more important things than, whatever that is personally in that career progression. And you could apply that analogy at almost any level. In our case, it's kind of playing out at the senior most levels. But, it didn't appear certainly that at that sort of strategic level, there was a whole lot of problem solving going on. Now, the folks on the ground, I know them personally, and they're doing everything they can to solve problems. Mm-hmm. And so don't want to, again, politicize them in a very political situation. Like it's emotionally charged. It's very politically sensitive. And that's where armchair quarterbacking really makes my blood boil, is when I've seen some articles criticizing my former teammates for not doing as much as they could have, when we all know they're forward deployed doing the best they can with the resources they have, with the amount of political top cover that is not there.
I want to go back to something that you said earlier, Mike, about lessons learned and what do we teach these millennials. And that strikes close to home, because I got a 20-year-old son, and I'm constantly seeing the world through his viewpoint, like what he's had to go through. And I would say that the two biggest things that I would offer to them is being uncomfortable is all right. And we've worked really, really hard to make them comfortable, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be uncomfortable at some point in their life. And the next point, and I'm drawing a blank for the second one. No, but yeah, going back to it, I do think that there's a lot of armchair quarterbacking going on, and there's a lot of criticism for the actions that were taken yesterday and a year ago and 2 years ago. But what I would also offer to millennials is to say, we've seen the country united. Like, we lived it, and we know what that power is. We understand what good that does. They'll never feel that. But if they can listen to us, and if I could teach them that lesson, that this country was united under the hardest conditions, and it's happened before in history. So I believe that it needs to be taught, and I hope that it continues to get taught. But if it doesn't, they need to understand that we're not so different. One person from another, a Canadian from an American. We all want to take care of our families, and we want our children to live better lives than we lived. And just realize that we all don't hate each other, that we were all united under the worst conditions, and we can do that again. And I think we lose sight of that. We're narrow-sighted. Within a year, it's gone.
And there were people in Afghanistan and Iraq, good people that just wanted the same thing, peace and prosperity for their families. I think it speaks poorly of us when it takes a tragedy like 9/11 to come together. Mm-hmm. We're better than that. We are better than that. But Eric, I still want to hear from you the major takeaways.
Yeah, I'll get to them. I'll ask you a question real quick.
No, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way. Okay, back in my box. The two things that I would tell them is more kind of like straightforward and almost more tactical than a philosophical discussion, is because I'm not as smart as these guys. is one, be proactive and not reactive. Afghanistan should have never happened had we taken out Osama bin Laden when we knew he was a problem. We can all agree on that. It's not up for debate. We wanted to take him out. We didn't. We paid the price for it. We repeated that problem with ISIS. I don't know how many American heads they had to cut off before we said, maybe we should do something about this. And in fact, we didn't because of that. They took over half of Syria and half of Iraq, and they were like, well, now that they're a huge problem, we'll get involved. So I would tell them to be proactive and not reactive. Please learn from us in that facet. And the other one, I would just simply tell them, and hey, this is my opinion, don't nation build. Don't nation build. Or if you do, you be very, very picky about who you are willing to give American assets and taxpayers and time and blood to that was more than just an ass kicking and come home. I would say go do what needs to be done. Leave a note that says we'll be back if there's another problem, and don't repeat our faults. That's what I tell them.
To your second point, completely 100% agree. It was a flawed strategy, and I think we fool ourselves into believing that we have that capability to go into a culture that's vastly different.
No.
And history shows that that's flawed. I do agree with you. And, I used to, with my son, before he went to bed, say the prayer of Tecumseh. And we knew it by heart, and I would, I'd butcher it now. But if you ever read that poem, it's treat people with respect, stand for what you believe in, be prepared to give your life for a cause. To the children, a great quote is, the only thing necessary for the evil of triumph
is for good men to
do nothing.
Yes,
and I know we know that by heart.
Love that quote.
Right.
You were talking about, the 9/11 brought people together. I can only really think of two instances, both Afghanistan related, that America has come together in the past 20 years. 9/11
And the exit.
UBL. The death of UBL. Never seen so many college students waving American flags and proud, of God's work being done than those two instances. And I really can't think of two other instances outside of 2 decades that were close to those two.
I had mixed feelings when the people were in the streets celebrating UBL's death.
Yeah.
Because while that was strategic for all of us, it was just another day. And I just thought about all the guys that were killed to get up to that point. And so there wasn't much solace for me when he was killed.
I mean, to kind of speak to our previous conversation about transparency in what's going on over there, right? I mean, we have to recognize that this was the first real sense of something happening that the nation and the world could grab onto, right? I mean, we lived it every day, so for us it was just another day. But to have that type of news, and again, you can debate all day long. Do you celebrate that on death? Do you celebrate with death? Like that. But again, this is it's a unifying moment, I think.
Yeah.
And he was a symbol. He was
Right.
I mean,
that's what it was.
That was important for the nation and the world. But even then, we still see people who doubt that. So there's always people who are going to be casting doubt. The key is to focus on the unification.
It wasn't VE Day. It wasn't Victory in Europe Day.
Right.
The war wasn't over.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And history's
Could have
shown
been.
that.
Well, until we got Bo out. I think Bo was more important.
Bo Bergdahl.
Bo Bergdahl,
No.
having an American soldier that was a prisoner of war,
Yeah, that
that
can't happen.
everybody hangs that flag and everybody talks about it. But all of us in this room know we were intimately familiar with that mission. We knew about that mission every single time that it was our turn on deck.
Yeah.
Everybody understood that. And I think once we grabbed him, and that feeling, that overwhelming feeling to say, yeah that was the closure.
I agree with that too.
And Brent and I were on that deployment, and we were responsible for picking him up. And however messed up that sounded, the exchange that happened, the fact that we can say that is our number one goal, is to never leave a soldier behind, like, yeah, we have other mandates also, but we will go to all ends of the earth to pull somebody out of there. And the second we did that, that was 10 times more important to me than Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden was cool, but you're just like Mike said, I think that was just another day.
And a testament to the boys that pulled that off. That was awesome. I mean, my pride for them. And I know, for the listeners, when we watch our brothers go and do something great, there's this subtle jealousy. You're like, damn, I wish I was there with them.
Absolutely.
But you're also so wildly proud. All you can do is hug them and say, hey, good job. You just made us all look amazing. Guys, I want to close this out this way. We're not done yet, but there's a lot of veterans out there that are going to be listening to this. And some of those are not veterans yet. They're still on active duty, and their transition is about to happen. Talk to me about your transition, how you went through that, what that was like, and what you're doing now. And I know all of you, and we're very strategic about who we brought on. Eric helped me, who we brought on to this podcast to represent our brotherhood. And you're all doing amazing things, and you've redefined yourselves. Let me start with Glenn, because Glenn, what you've done is, I have nothing but admiration and respect for you.
Well, thank you. And I figure out what it is, I'll let you know. My transition is hard, and it was way harder than I thought. And it took me a couple of years of almost convincing myself that it wasn't hard for me to actually take a look in the mirror and be like, no, this is really hard. And I was trying to replace an environment that's irreplaceable. And, while feeling fulfilled and trying to have a new mission and, provide for my family financially and take care of myself. And I think be accepting of the fact that you're probably never going to replace what you came out of, because it's a very special environment with very special people. And just be grateful that you had the opportunity to experience that and to live that life. I would urge everyone who's listening to be kind to yourself, to take the time. You don't need to have all the answers of like what you're going to do next on day one. Have some patience and be kind to yourself. I think I have learned in my transition that vulnerability is a strength. And there's people in my life who I turn to, and they turn to me, and we're very vulnerable. And that is an incredible source of strength. And it's okay to tell the toughest guys in the world how you're feeling, and to talk about your emotions, and to sort of think back on your experiences with compassion and with a learning and with a gratitude of, the fact that you were there. And so, I guess I could probably talk for hours on it. Be kind to yourself. Don't be in a rush, and find those people close to you and talk to them and trust them. And you don't need to sugarcoat how you feel, because every single person probably feels the same way, and there's strength in vulnerability.
Glenn, talk a little about what you've built with 1-9 and how you're living in the memory of those that fell.
Shameless plug. While I was a squadron commander, I was always an investor, just as a hobby. I built an investment fund, 1-9 Investments, and in my transition, I really sort of saw what special operations forces and national security organizations are doing on a day-to-day basis to solve really crazy problems. And so I've built a venture capital fund that is a national security and critical infrastructure fund that focuses on technologies to enhance, national security, but also what I kind of call the new normal and the new critical infrastructure of things that weren't traditional national security, that have this dual use nature where SOF or intelligence community type validation of these capabilities extend to areas of our society that are very critical. And, I'm kind of first to market doing this in Canada. There's some great folks doing it in the States that I've aligned with. We've built a little bit of a community amongst sort of like-minded folks that are investing and looking in the same domains. And so, I'm hoping to, build a successful company and, and directly and indirectly continue to contribute to national security by staying ahead of the problems that we all experienced before the rest of society sort of experienced these problems. And we solved them. And we solved them, like what you said, Mike, without really knowing how to solve them. We just kind of iterated and figured out how to do it. And a lot of the times we used technology to solve those problems. And those are the ones that really interest me. And continuing to validate and prove those out, and then getting them out into the arenas that need this type of technology to kind of continue to safeguard. Because, you're saying, let's not fight the last war. There's a new, bigger issue that sort of we don't really speak about a whole lot, but it's coming.
The parallels between special operations and technology, even startups, is staggering.
So this is my whole thesis, and it's not rocket science, but venture capital and a special operations mission are almost identical. It's about applying finite resources at a specific point in time to achieve a specific effect in a high risk, high reward environment where you need to have an exit. I mean, how is that not venture investing in the startup world?
Yeah.
And so I'll get off my shameless plug for what I'm doing. But it's being brilliant at the basics. It's about leveraging a group of subject matter experts with, early warning, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, making informed decisions, having the balls to make tough decisions with incomplete information, and building a series of supporting and contingency plans so that you know what you're going to do when X, Y, and Z happen. And it's not stressful, or it's not a catastrophic event, because you have an audible that you can call, and everybody in the team knows what audible needs to, or what has to happen with that audible.
Again, it's been impressive to watch you build that, and brag about what you built and where you're going with that. Proud to be a small part of it. So Brent, your transition, how was it? What are you doing now, and how are you continuing to live in the memory of our fallen?
Well, as of about 20 seconds ago, I just started working for 1-9.
You're in any day.
I'm fresh off the boat, so to speak. I just retired in April. I'm still figuring out what I want to do when I grow up. That transition was scary for me. I'd been on the government tit for 20 years. I'd never really thought about what I was going to do afterwards. I told myself that, hey, you made it to tier 1 in this. Like, you're not a one-trick pony. You'll be successful afterwards. But like, telling yourself that and believe in it, or when you got 4 mouths to feed, it still worries you. But I do know this, and just in this very short time, I've done some independent contracting. I've done some consulting. And I've had several job offers. I've just been lucky enough where I didn't have to be in a rush and pick the first thing. And I'm no longer worried about it. Not worried about it one bit. If you were a good dude, then you're the same attributes that got you where you were are going to continue to help you out in your next phase of life. I 100% do believe that now. And I don't know, we'll figure it out.
Well, you sound like you're a lot further ahead than where I was at 6 months after my retirement. So well done. Hey man, is there something you do on a day-to-day basis? Prayer, meditation, anything to remember the guys, or is it something you just try to bury deep down and forget?
I wish I had a better answer than that, but it's probably the latter. I bear it deep down. I just bear it deep down, and I wish I had a cooler answer for you about all the great things that I continue to do for him. I do believe this, because I believe this. Had I fallen, I would want guys to move on with their lives. that's what I would want for guys. Take a drink for me, on the day I died. Tell some funny stories about me, and raise your kids to be great Americans and move on. So that's what I would want, and that's kind of what I do.
I think that's the coolest answer you could give. So you hit it home. Eric.
Yeah, what Brent said, working for 1-9. So I got out in March of last year, and I was fortunate enough to recognize something that got me in the position that I was at, where I made it to where I felt like was the top of my game, was finding people that seemed like they got it figured out, and then seeing how they did it. And I use you as an example. So your first initiative that you started was a great transition program that I went through, and it kind of gave me the blueprint for essentially what I needed to do to become a tier 1 private citizen. And it requires that level of discipline. It requires you to go back to school. And I saw what you did. I saw you were pursuing your master's. So I'm in my second year of my master's right now. And I knew that there's some select things that I needed to do that maybe weren't fun, but the pipeline wasn't fun either. Going through 2 years of getting kicked in the balls is not fun, but it got me to a place. So I think that hard work is associated with becoming exceptional, like you're saying, Brent. And I don't think it's an accident that I made it to the level that I was at. I think I have the capability of replicating that, but it's just recognizing a new environment and how to put hard work into that new environment to get you to the place to where you're at. So if I'm making the recommendation to anybody who's getting out, they're getting ready to get out, I would say go through a professional organization that offers a transition program. And I'll plug the Honor Foundation because they're one of the best things that ever happened for me, to have a curriculum taught and then to have mentors. I think that's another huge thing. Have a mentor, and it doesn't need to be a military person. As a matter of fact, it shouldn't be a military person. Have somebody that challenges you, that thinks differently. That is going to speed up your process of entering the private sector and being good at something else. You don't have to stay. The third thing is you don't have to stay in the same sector. You don't have to stay in defense. You have applicable skills that belong in another area. You just have to make yourself aware of them, and you have to get out there and get uncomfortable. So get uncomfortable. And then when it goes to the remembrance of the guys, every single day I think about those guys. Every single day, Andy, Dan, and John, and Josh Wheeler, and John Dunbar. I think about those guys every single day, and that's helped me to find my passion, which is the Shields and Stripes, the nonprofit that I'm part of, that helps first responders and veterans suffering from PTSD and traumatic brain injury. And it's through a holistic approach to healing. So healing happens when you bring in multiple directions, multiple modalities, and we offer that to our members for no cost to them. We're holding our first class in September 19th. We'll have a fire department, a firefighter, a cop, a veteran, and an active duty member that we're going to be putting through the program. And we want to show cops and firefighters and first line responders, we want to show them that they're going through the same exact thing chemically in their brain, what we go through. It's still trauma. So these guys that are suffering in silence that we've seen for the past 7 or 8 years dealing with this, I want to be a change for that. I want to be a change agent for that, and to go to war against this suicide rate. That's the new no-fail mission. So I would say find your next mission, and it does not have to be defense.
The fact that you keep giving back, man, I love it. I'll tell a quick story. So I stood up a foundation with the help of Admiral McRaven, Admiral Bobby Inman, General Tony Cucolo, and a lot of good people in Austin, where we created an MBA Light for senior military leaders such as yourselves, people with close to 20 years of leadership experience. And so I went out, and it was one of the toughest things I've ever had to do. I raised $500,000 within about 6 months, and I never want to do that again. But Eric was amongst the 25 senior military leaders that we put through this program at the University of Texas McCombs Business School. And Eric quickly sort of becomes the star student. And, you know, the professors, these MBA professors, are just like, this Eric guy is so amazing. And at first I'm like, yeah, good dude, man. I'm not surprised he's the star pupil. and it was just Eric and Eric and Eric. And I'm like, hey, I stood this program up. And on the last day, the culmination, we have dinner at, I forget where, and they're like, hey, Mike, of course we want you to speak. And then Eric will speak right behind you. I'm like, what's going on here? So I hated you for a little bit. Like, this guy stole my, but no, I'm joking. I was so proud of you. I was not surprised. Unfortunately, that shut down due to politics. I didn't understand the battle space on which I was operating, which I was let's say, new to the private sector, and I should have known that better. But big time lesson learned. So thank you, Rich.
I mean, these identities we build, we can think of them as mountains that we climb. Okay, and it takes a while. And those of us who spend 20 years or anything around that, we spend a lot of time climbing a particular mountain. We get to a peak, and then sometimes overnight it's gone, right? And we're thrust off the mountain. The identity's gone. And the best way to combat a lost identity is to build a new one. Okay, but you can't hop from peak to peak. To go to the next peak, you have to throw yourself into the valley and then make a new climb. And so you need to get your hands dirty and take some risk and get muddy and gritty and sometimes ask yourself, what the hell am I doing? And I know for me coming out, I always felt like, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of organizations and people who want to understand and learn from what the military does and kind of get the secret sauce. And I think that I felt like there was a responsibility to articulate that in a way that was not grandstanding and a bunch of telling stories about operations and things like that. But I didn't know how to do it. And I knew what was required of me was to get in front of people and start learning how to speak in front of people and teach and things like that. And I remember I took a job with a wonderful leadership institute, and they were sending me out on these. I'd go give talks to 10 or 12 people in the middle of nowhere for free, right? And I'd say to myself, what the heck am I doing? I mean, I went from this apex, right? And now I'm just in the middle of nowhere giving a talk for free. But I knew this was the grind. This was, I was getting my hands dirty again. I was working it, and I liked it because it was part of the climb. And so I think every person who's looking at transitioning has to understand that to build a new identity takes work. It takes the very same things that it took to build the original one. I think the other thing is to understand that many times that first place you land is not going to be the place you are a year or two later, right? So there's going to be it's an iterative process, and look at it as another climb that you can, another challenge to enjoy, because that's what it is. And you can build a whole new identity. You can build a new tribe. You can keep you can keep in contact with those brothers you had, and because a lot of them are going through the same thing, because a lot of us, because we're the same age, we kind of go through the same stuff, so we all have stories we can share. But then those folks we lost, I mean, they maintain a part of our lives just through the way we remember them. And I probably wouldn't say I think about the folks I lost every day. I mean, a guy like Brian, he wafts in and out of my experience. I'll see someone on the street, it's like, that looks like Brian, right? He'll or I'll hear a joke. I'm like, man, Brian would love that joke, right? And so it's kind of this element of kind of coming in and out of my experience that keeps them alive and true, and that goes for all the brothers, and in some cases sisters we've lost, right? So yeah, it's a journey. It's a tough one, but everyone who chooses to do it goes through the tough aspects, and we all have what it takes. So.
A very positive, realistic message for the veterans that are transitioning. Maybe you're only a year in. Give it time. Give it time. It just, you'll find your way. What you think you want to do coming out of the military is usually drastically different than what you're meant to do coming out of the military. And it even took me 5-6 different positions to finally find my place. Well, fellas, I want to thank you for coming on. I want to thank you for being vulnerable and digging deep and talking about a subject that we necessarily will always pass on talking about. But I've enjoyed the last 24 hours, a reminder of the things that I loved and missed about my time in the military. And I think I speak for all of us when, to the listeners, I say, we want to pass our prayers and our thoughts to the families of those 13 American service members that were killed. God bless that you had husbands, wives, mothers, sisters, sons and daughters like that to go forward to protect us. And so we are with you in thought and in prayers. Well, guys, that wraps up the second episode of the 20th anniversary for 9/11. I genuinely hope there's something that you took away, something that you learned to bring betterment to your lives. Again, this is Truth and Tribe with Mike Sarraille. Thank you.